The tension in the hearing room was so heavy you could feel it pressing down. Senator Marsha Blackburn, polished in her navy suit and signature smirk, leaned back like a veteran predator. She had just launched what she thought was the perfect knockout blow. Maybe if the gentlewoman from Texas had actually read a book instead of tweeting all day, she'd understand basic economics. Blackburn sneered, her Tennessee drawl dripping with condescension. The words landed like venom. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters froze mid-note. Even the stenographer stopped typing. Everyone waited for the younger congresswoman to crumble. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. What she pulled out next didn't just silence Blackburn. It shattered her credibility and flipped the entire narrative of the hearing. This wasn't just another committee exchange. It was a collision between two eras of American politics. Blackburn, 71, had built her career on wielding experience like a weapon, talking down to anyone younger, especially women of color. She came armed with charts, stats, and a smirk honed over decades of intimidating rivals. But across the table sat someone who represented everything the old guard feared. Jasmine Crockett, 42, lawyer, civil rights attorney, rising political star. Younger, bolder, sharper, and completely unwilling to be dismissed. What Blackburn didn't know was that Crockett had been underestimated her entire life. She'd made a career of it. From graduating law school with honors to dismantling opponents in courtrooms, she had mastered the art of staying calm, stacking the facts, and letting preparation speak louder than pride. So when Blackburn swung with her trademark, insult, Crockett didn't fire back with anger. She fired back with proof. And in that moment, the room and the country saw something unforgettable. This was no longer just about economics. It was about respect, representation, and whether politics built on intimidation could survive in an age of instant fact checks and viral moments. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, everyone knew one career had just been elevated and another had suffered its most humiliating blow yet, having run businesses in the real world. Blackburn said, adjusting her glasses with a theatrical pause. I understand what works in practice versus what just sounds good in theory. The jab was aimed squarely at Jasmine Crockett. Everyone in the room knew it. But Crockett didn't bite. She sat calmly jotting notes, occasionally whispering to her chief of staff. No eye rolls, no sharp retort. Just quiet composure, which only seemed to irritate Blackburn more. What the Tennessee senator didn't realize was that Crockett's stillness wasn't weakness. It was strategy. She was cataloging every slight, every condescending remark, preparing to dismantle Blackburn piece by piece. Years of courtroom battles had taught her, never react in anger. Build the case, then drop it when the time is right. During the 15-minute recess, the gallery buzzed. Reporters whispered predictions. Blackburn's setting her up, one veteran muttered. This is about to get ugly. What they didn't see was Crockett's chief of staff sliding her a thick folder they'd prepared weeks earlier. An arsenal of opposition research, voting records, business filings, tax documents, attendance logs, even transcripts. They had anticipated this exact fight. She's walking right into it, Crockett murmured with the faintest smile. When the session resumed, Blackburn escalated. She dissected provisions of the bill with overly technical jargon, then slowed her speech, as if explaining to children. At one point, she pulled out a calculator, loudly punching in basic arithmetic that any teenager could do. Perhaps some of my colleagues need me to break this down more simply, she said, her smirk widening. The room shifted uncomfortably. Even Republicans on the committee began squirming. The Democrats sat braced, waiting for Crockett's move. Dot. The chairman tried to restore order. Senator Blackburn, perhaps we could return to the bill's specific provisions. Oh, I'm very focused, Mr. Chairman. Blackburn cut in, waving him off. Focused on ensuring we have informed discussions here, not social media sound bites and empty talking points. The implication was unmistakable. A black congresswoman reduced to a hashtag generator. A few members exchanged sharp looks. Even Blackburn's allies knew she had crossed a line. Dot. The air grew electric. The showdown was inevitable. And it came during the discussion on tax incentives. Dot. Crockett leaned in, voice steady, notes in hand. She laid out a meticulous case for how the bill would fuel small businesses in underserved communities. Hard numbers, peer-reviewed studies, real-world examples from other states. In my district alone, Crockett said firmly, more than 2,000 small businesses would benefit from these tax incentives. The tone was clear. This wasn't about social media. This was about facts, and Crockett had them all. The Regional Planning Commission study shows this bill could generate 15,000 new jobs in just 3 years. Crockett said evenly, with average wages in these communities rising by 18%. It was the kind of meticulous, fact-based argument that radiated preparation and command of the issue. Any serious lawmaker might have debated the data, but Senator Marsha Blackburn saw her opening. Dot. She leaned forward, that practiced smirk stretching across her face, like a hunter spotting wounded prey. Well, that's an interesting perspective, she drawled, putting poison into the word interesting. But perhaps the gentlewoman from Texas should leave complex economic analysis to those of us who actually understand how business works in the real world. The room froze. Even the stenographer looked up in disbelief. It wasn't just a policy jab. It was a direct insult to Crockett's competence. Dot. Crockett didn't flinch. She calmly scribbled a note, as if Blackburn had said nothing more than a procedural. Aside. That composure only made Blackburn angrier. She had expected outrage, maybe even tears. Instead, she was being dismissed, politically invisible. To her, that was the deepest insult of all. Her voice rose. When we discuss matters of this complexity, we need experience and real knowledge, not campaign promises and wishful thinking. Colleagues shifted uncomfortably. A Democratic member shot Crockett a supportive glance. Even Republicans fidgeted, sensing Blackburn was crossing a line. But Blackburn couldn't stop herself. In her mind, she was the seasoned stateswoman, disciplining a reckless child. To everyone else, she looked like a bully. And then she overplayed. Her hand. Mr. Chairman. Blackburn snapped, nearly shouting now, her face flushed. It's clear some members of this committee simply aren't prepared for discussions at this level. She paused, savoring the moment. Then came the fatal blow. Maybe if the gentlewoman from Texas had actually read a book instead of tweeting all day, she'd understand basic economics. The words detonated in the chamber. Silence fell like a curtain. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. It was a naked insult. Brazen, demeaning, impossible to spin as anything but personal contempt. A few of Blackburn's Republican colleagues shook their heads. Her staff stared down at their phones, already calculating damage control. But Blackburn reclined in her chair, satisfied. She thought she had crushed her rival. She thought she had won. What she didn't notice, what everyone else did, was that Jasmine Crockett had stopped taking notes. She set her pen down. And that's when the real fight began. Crockett closed her folder and lifted her gaze. The look she fixed on Blackburn could have rattled a seasoned trial lawyer. The silence stretched. 10 seconds that felt like an eternity. The chairman shifted uncomfortably, his hand brushing his gavel, as though he might need it to break the tension. Finally, he cleared his throat. Does the gentlewoman from Texas wish to respond to the senator from Tennessee? Even in his wording, it was obvious. He wasn't asking for more debate. He was giving Crockett a chance to defend herself from an attack that had crossed every line of professional conduct. Crockett's eyes swept the room. Reporters frozen mid-scribble, Democrats fuming, Republicans staring at the floor, embarrassed for their colleague. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but resonant, the kind of steady authority that made everyone sit up straighter. "You know what, Mr. Chairman?" She rose from her chair with deliberate slowness, every movement calculated like an attorney preparing to deliver a closing argument. "Yes, I think I would very much like to respond." The air in the room shifted. Everyone could feel it. The moment before the storm. What came next would become legend. Crockett stood tall, folder in hand, her eyes locked on Blackburn. When she began, her voice was low, steady, and lethal. "Well, Senator Blackburn, since you've raised questions about reading habits and preparation, allow me to share a few things from my own." She opened her folder and spoke as though she were reciting evidence in a courtroom. "Just last week, I finished the Federal Reserve's comprehensive report on regional economic disparities. 847 pages of data and analysis. It directly contradicts many of the assumptions you've repeated this morning about small business lending. Perhaps you missed it. Between fundraisers." Blackburn's smirk flickered. "And I've reviewed the Congressional Budget Office's multi-state study on development programs. Their findings? These initiatives generate an average 3.2-1 return over 5 years, with job creation exceeding projections by 23%. That's peer-reviewed economics, Senator. Or, as you might call it, Twitter math." The room stirred. Cameras zoomed in. Crockett stepped away from her chair and began circling the committee table slowly, never breaking eye contact. "And since you want to talk about preparation, I should mention, I've also read the complete voting records of this committee for the past 5 years. Very revealing, very instructive." Members shifted nervously in their seats, wondering if they might be next in her crosshairs. Then she stopped directly across from Blackburn. Her tone sharpened. "But the most enlightening reading of all, Senator, was my research into your record." She lifted a stack of papers from her folder. The sound of rustling pages echoed like a gavel strike. "Because when someone questions my intelligence, I like to know exactly how qualified they are to make such judgments." The room collectively held its breath. Everyone knew. Crockett wasn't just about to defend herself. She was about to dismantle Blackburn's credibility piece by piece. What Crockett revealed next would be discussed in political circles for decades. "Let's begin with your voting record, Senator," she said, her tone cool but unyielding. "In 2019, you voted against reauthorizing the Small Business Innovation Research Program, the very program that created over 40,000 jobs in Tennessee and delivered more than $32 billion in federal investment to your state's businesses over the last decade." Blackburn opened her mouth to respond, but Crockett raised a hand like a judge, silencing a witness. "Oh, I'm not finished, Senator. You wanted to question my preparation. So let's review yours." Her voice was calm, steady, but every word cut like steel. "In 2020, you opposed expansion of the Community Development Financial Institutions Fund. That program has directed more than $2 billion into rural Tennessee communities. The same ones you claim to champion on your campaign. Website. The room buzzed. Reporters hammered at their keyboards. Even the usually detached chairman was leaning forward, riveted. And in 2021, Crockett continued, you voted against strengthening the Minority Business Development Agency, despite the fact that minority-owned businesses in Tennessee employ over 150,000 people and contribute $18 billion a year to your state's economy. Republican members shifted uncomfortably, some already glancing at their phones, no doubt fielding frantic texts from staff about the damage being done. So tell me, Senator, when you talk about understanding how business works in the real world, Crockett asked, her voice sharpening, is this what you mean? Blocking every program that actually creates jobs? Blackburn's smile had vanished, but Crockett wasn't done. She flipped to another page in her folder. Since you've raised questions about credentials, let's look at yours. According to Mississippi State University, you never actually completed your business degree. You dropped out in 1973. An audible gasp rippled through the room. Now there's nothing wrong with that choice, Crockett added smoothly, her voice maddeningly calm. Plenty of people leave school for valid reasons, but it is curious that someone so eager to lecture others about reading and preparation never finished the books required for her own degree program. Blackburn's face blanched. She stammered, something about life experience, but it fell flat. The damage was done. Oh, and it gets more interesting. Crockett pressed on, flipping again. You like to highlight your success as an entrepreneur, your company, marketing strategies, which you often tout in speeches. According to Tennessee state records, it was dissolved in 1998 after failing to pay more than $30,000 in state taxes. The room fell utterly silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. Blackburn sat frozen, gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. And while we're discussing preparation, Crockett continued mercilessly, let's talk about your performance here in Congress. In the past 2 years, you've missed 47% of your committee hearings. For someone who claims to care about understanding complex issues, you certainly skip a lot of opportunities to actually learn about them. By now, Republican colleagues were slumped in their seats, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. One shook his head in disgust. Another scrolled furiously on his phone, no doubt watching the social media explosion unfold in real time. But Crockett still wasn't finished. She had saved her most devastating evidence for the finale. Since you felt comfortable questioning my intelligence and understanding of economics, Senator, she said, turning squarely toward Blackburn, her voice now carrying the weight of a prosecutor's closing argument. Let's review your own words. She lifted a sheet from her folder. 3 weeks ago in Nashville, you told a public forum that inflation was caused by, quote, too many people having good-paying jobs. Do you remember saying that? Because I have the video on my phone if you'd like a refresher. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Crockett didn't pause. That statement shows either a complete ignorance of basic economics or a callous disregard for working families. Either way, it raises serious questions about your fitness to make policy for the American people. She flipped to another page. And last month you claimed that raising the minimum wage would destroy small businesses across Tennessee. Yet, your own state's Department of Economic Development published a study just 6 months ago, showing the opposite. The 5 Tennessee counties with higher local minimum wages saw small business growth outpace the state average by 23%. Blackburn was now visibly sinking in her chair, her earlier bravado gone. What had begun as an attempted ambush had turned into her own public undoing. Crockett returned to her seat, but remained standing to deliver the final blow. So before you ever again question my intelligence, my preparation, or my qualifications, Senator, perhaps you should ask yourself a few simple questions. Her voice rose, echoing across the chamber, steady and unflinching. Which one of us actually finished her education? Which one of us actually reads the reports and studies before casting votes? Which one of us consistently shows up to do the work our constituents elected us to do? Which one of us has a record of supporting policies that help businesses and create jobs? The silence was suffocating now. Every camera zoomed in, every reporter's fingers froze above the keyboard. And most importantly, Crockett said, her voice now edged with righteous fire, which one of us came to this hearing prepared with facts and evidence, and which one came with nothing but condescension, prejudice, and assumptions? She lowered herself calmly back into her chair, opened her folder to a clean page, and resumed taking notes as if she had just concluded routine business, rather than delivering one of the most brutal takedowns in congressional history. The silence that followed seemed eternal. Blackburn sat frozen, mouth slightly open, her political persona collapsing in real time. Her colleagues, Republican and Democrat alike, were stunned, many too shocked to even shift in their seats. Even the chairman looked paralyzed, as though he had just witnessed a confrontation so one-sided it defied the usual playbook of congressional decorum. The chairman cleared his throat and stammered, "Well, I think perhaps we should move on to the next item of business." But everyone in that chamber knew there was no moving on from what they had just witnessed. The old rules of political sparring had been rewritten in real time by a 42-year-old congresswoman who had turned a condescending attack into a surgical demolition of her opponent's credibility. As the committee attempted to proceed with routine business, Blackburn sat in silence for the remaining 3 hours. She didn't ask another question, didn't offer another comment, didn't even glance up from her papers. The senator who had strutted into the hearing eager to humiliate her younger colleague was now a hollow presence, reduced to silent sin, the very arena she once dominated. Crockett, by contrast, carried on as if nothing unusual had occurred. She pressed witnesses with substantive questions, proposed thoughtful amendments grounded in her district's needs, and demonstrated precisely the preparation, intellect, and policy fluency Blackburn had mocked her for lacking. The contrast was devastating. The experienced senator had been reduced to a spectator, while the so-called inexperienced freshman was leading the substantive conversation. When the hearing finally adjourned, the political fallout detonated instantly. Within minutes, social media lit up like a nuclear blast. Clips of Crockett's response spread at record speed, racking up millions of views in the first hour alone. But this wasn't just another viral moment destined to fade in a news cycle. This was a turning point, one that would reshape careers and reframe how political discourse was judged in the digital age. The hashtag #Crockett destroys Blackburn rocketed to the #1 trending topic not only in the United States, but globally within 45 minutes. Political journalists, activists, and ordinary citizens alike flooded timelines with reactions. "I've covered politics for 30 years," tweeted one veteran reporter with nearly 1 million followers. "I have never seen anything like what Jasmine Crockett just did to Marsha Blackburn. This wasn't a rebuttal. It was a complete demolition of everything Blackburn claims to stand for." The tweet was reposted over 100,000 times in just 2 hours. Conservative commentators scrambled for footing, some trying to frame Blackburn's comments as legitimate criticism, rather than personal attacks. But even Republican voters struggled to defend her. "Look, I'm a conservative and usually back Blackburn," wrote one right-leaning blogger. But she walked into that hearing unprepared, made assumptions about a colleague because of her age and race, and got destroyed by someone who actually did her homework. Meanwhile, liberal commentators reveled in the spectacle. Major networks replayed the exchange frame by frame, with political scientists dissecting it as a textbook example of how composure and preparation can neutralize prejudice and condescension. But perhaps the most telling reactions came from Capitol Hill veterans themselves. "I've been working here for 22 years, one senior staffer confided to a reporter. "I've seen shouting matches, insults, ugly moments, but I have never seen anyone dismantled as completely as Marsha. Blackburn just was. And the worst part? She handed Crockett the scalpel. The political implications were immediate and seismic. Within 6 hours, traffic crashed Crockett's campaign donation page. Small dollar contributions poured in from all 50 states, many with notes explicitly praising her refusal to back down from racist attacks. By the end of the day, Crockett had raised more than $2.3 million from over 45,000 individual donors, one of the largest single-day fundraising hauls in recent congressional memory. And this was only the beginning. The donations pouring into Crockett's campaign weren't just from loyal Democrats. They came from suburban women, young professionals, and even disillusioned Republican voters disgusted by Blackburn's behavior and impressed by Crockett's composure. "She showed you don't have to sit there and take it when someone tries to humiliate you," said a Virginia mother who chipped in $50, the first political donation of her life. "She stood up for herself with class and facts. That's the kind of leader I want for my daughter's generation." For Blackburn, the aftermath was nothing short of a nightmare. Her office released a short statement insisting she stood by her comments and was disappointed by the uncivil tone of Crockett's reply. But the line backfired instantly. "Uncivil tone?" a political commentator wrote online. Blackburn questioned a colleague's intelligence and fitness for office based on racist stereotypes. When that colleague answered with hard evidence from Blackburn's own record, suddenly civility matters. The hypocrisy is staggering. News networks rushed to book both women, but the difference was striking. Producers invited Crockett to discuss her policy expertise and her vision for the Democratic Party's future. Blackburn, on the other hand, was being asked to explain and defend her remarks. Crockett's office fielded dozens of requests from policy forums, academic conferences, and serious news programs. Political science departments even began inviting her to lecture on effective communication and strategies for younger lawmakers facing intimidation. Blackburn's team went into damage control mode, ducking most interviews. When she did appear on friendly programs, her explanations only deepened the damage. Meanwhile, Democrats seized the opportunity. The Tennessee Democratic Party launched fundraising ads featuring the viral clip under the tagline, "Tennessee deserves better than politicians who attack colleagues instead of doing their jobs." The campaign landed especially hard in suburban and urban areas, where Blackburn was already losing ground with younger, more diverse voters. Republican strategists privately admitted the exchange was a disaster. "This is our worst nightmare," one senior GOP consultant confessed. An older white senator makes condescending, arguably racist remarks toward a younger black congresswoman, and then gets demolished with facts on live TV. It reinforces every negative stereotype we've been fighting, the moment quickly became bigger than a single exchange. Political scientists and commentators pointed to it as proof of a generational shift. In the past, authority and seniority could silence younger lawmakers. But in an era of instant fact-checking and viral media, preparation and precision now carried more weight than bluster. Blackburn's tactics might have worked 20 years ago, said Dr. Sarah Martinez, a professor of political communications. But Crockett came with receipts, and the skill to use them. That combination was devastating, yet professional. It's a new blueprint for how the next generation of leaders will dismantle intimidation. The exchange quickly became a textbook case in crisis communication. Instead of reacting with anger or defensiveness, Crockett stayed composed, anchored her arguments in verifiable facts, and transformed an attempted smear into proof of her own. Preparation and skill. Young politicians across the country began studying the footage like lecture notes. Her playbook was simple but devastatingly effective. Stay calm, document everything, anticipate the attacks, and counter with evidence, not emotion. She didn't just defend herself, one veteran strategist observed. She went on offense with nothing but her opponent's record. It was political jujitsu at its finest. The impact inside Congress was immediate. Democratic leaders who had once viewed Crockett as a promising but untested freshman suddenly began talking about her as a rising star. Within days, her name was being floated for high-profile committee assignments and leadership tracks. What she showed in that hearing, one senior Democrat said privately, is exactly the kind of talent and backbone our party needs. That wasn't just holding her ground. That was presidential-level composure. For Blackburn, the fallout was brutal. Republicans who once praised her reliability began backing away, canceling joint events under the guise of scheduling conflicts. The distance only widened as investigative reporters, energized by Crockett's revelations, dug into Blackburn's background. The findings were devastating. A flagship newspaper confirmed not only the tax issues Crockett had cited, but uncovered a string of failed ventures and unpaid debts. An analysis of Senate records showed Blackburn ranked among the worst in attendance, missing votes on issues she publicly championed. Most damaging of all, her long-claimed business studies at Mississippi State were exposed as fiction. She had enrolled in a general liberal arts track, scraped by with poor grades in a handful of business courses, and dropped out. She's been living a political lie for decades, one columnist wrote. The image of a sharp, successful businesswoman was smoke and mirrors. Crockett didn't just dismantle her in that hearing. She blew open 40 years of exaggeration. Local press soon piled on. Tennessee papers revealed that many of Blackburn's economic wins were actually initiated by predecessors. At town halls, once friendly audiences turned hostile. "I thought she was smart, thought she'd fight for us," a Memphis voter said bluntly. "But after that video, she just looks like a bully who can't even do her homework." The damage snowballed. Within weeks, 3 Republican primary challengers were openly weighing campaigns. Major donors began redirecting checks. As one longtime GOP benefactor admitted, "She's become a liability. We can't afford candidates who humiliate themselves on national TV and then get exposed as frauds." For Crockett, the aftermath told a different story. Every revelation that weakened Blackburn only made Crockett's star rise higher. She was soon invited to headline major Democratic Party events, booked on national television to discuss policy, and her profile skyrocketed almost overnight. But more important than fame was impact. With her new platform, Crockett advanced the very agenda Blackburn had tried to block, the economic development bill that sparked their confrontation not only passed committee, It became law, channeling millions of dollars into underserved communities nationwide. The irony is perfect, one analyst observed. Blackburn tried to humiliate Crockett to stop her. Instead, she handed her a megaphone that helped those policies succeed. The confrontation also resonated far beyond politics. Countless young women, especially women of color, saw Crockett's calm, fact-driven response as a blueprint for facing discrimination in professional life. "I'm not a politician, but I deal with people like Senator Blackburn in my corporate job," one woman wrote online. "Watching Congresswoman Crockett showed me exactly how to handle it. Come prepared with facts, stay calm, and let their record speak for itself." Stories like hers poured across social media. Women shared their own workplace struggles, crediting Crockett with inspiring them to stand taller. Business schools, law schools, and leadership programs began assigning the video as required viewing, a masterclass in turning personal attacks into opportunities. 6 months later, polls confirmed the ripple effect. Voters of all parties said they valued fact-based preparation more and personal attacks less. One pollster called it a watershed moment, proof that Americans wanted discourse rooted in substance, not condescension. Historians later framed it as generational change. Younger politicians were refusing to tolerate the dismissiveness their predecessors endured. As one scholar put it, Crockett didn't just win an argument, she reset the rules of engagement. The fallout was dramatic. Within a year, Blackburn announced she would not seek re-election, citing family time. Insiders quietly admitted her old brand of politics no longer had a future. Meanwhile, Crockett's name began circulating as a contender for statewide office in Texas. Polls showed she could compete in races Democrats hadn't touched in decades. She went from a freshman nobody knew, one campaign consultant marveled, to a national figure in 20 minutes. That's the power of preparation meeting opportunity. The clash quickly became political folklore, a parable of how the old playbook of intimidation and assumptions collapsed under the weight of facts and professionalism. And the lesson was unmistakable. In an era of instant replay and viral clips, the winners are those who do their homework, stay ready, and never underestimate their opponents. As one observer quipped, "If you're going to question someone's intelligence, you better make sure the facts are actually on your side."